Anime and manga have a very interesting relationship with each other, and I always assumed with the newer, bigger animes that the adaptations were always going to be one-to-one, but I learned recently that that's not really the case. We're going to keep looking at Jujutsu Kaisen and take a look at episode 2 compared to chapters 2 and 3 of the manga. Just a disclaimer again, if you didn't watch the last video, I'm not going to really be talking about one-to-one animation versus manga panel because 99% of the time the panel is always going to look better. But if the interpretation from the animation is significantly different enough, then I'll definitely make a note of that. I'm also going to try to not talk about when the lines are slightly different because usually it's just a difference in translation, but if the lines are significantly different where the meaning is changed, then I'll definitely talk about that as well. But ultimately, the goal is to give you an experience of what you're missing out in the anime versus the manga, and vice versa. One thing I did forget to mention is the art that usually comes in before a chapter starts in the manga. This artwork starts off the volume in general, and I'm actually curious if later down the line this image holds any significance because at the time of this video, I'm actually not aware of any callback to this image yet. And then here is the 2-page spread for chapter 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, just featuring the 4 main characters of the manga. And then finally, here's the opening image for the start of chapter 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen, which features Itadori being possessed by Ryoma and Sukuna. So for this next difference, we actually have to go back to episode 1 for a second, because like I said in the last video, the start of chapter 2 is actually the beginning of episode 1 in the anime. In the manga, Itadori asks where both of his friends are at and where Fushiguro is, but in the anime, he just asks about Fushiguro. And then in the anime, when Gojo is explaining why he's at the school, he first stops to relish in how beat up Fushiguro is, and unlike in the manga, he takes multiple pictures and even tells Fushiguro to look at the camera, much to his annoyance. This one is so funny to me because I feel like no one actually acknowledges Gojo's blindfold in the anime, but in the manga, when Gojo is taking a good look at Itadori, Itadori asks himself, can he even see? It looks like in the anime they really want to make Gojo even cooler than he already was, so they make him explain why he likes Kikufuku Mochi so much, and they change the fight choreography slightly, so when Sukuna tries to attack him first, Gojo just ends up sitting on his back. So in the manga, when Sukuna complains about how annoying every era of Jujutsu sorcerers are, he also goes out of his way to call Gojo a stupid Jujutsu sorcerer. In the manga, when Gojo knocks out Itadori and carries him, he makes a comment that he's heavy, which makes sense if you remember that the manga mentions his body fat is in the single digits. Additionally, when he says that he knocks him out, he says success in the manga. Gojo is just much more chaotic in the manga as well. When he demonstrates that he can't destroy the fingers of Sukuna because they're too strong, he makes a hole in the wall. The Gojo in the anime is very nonchalant about it, but the Gojo in the manga thinks to himself, oops, I made a hole in the wall. Like I said in episode 1 as well, the manga can get away with just having a black background while a character either gives a monologue or some kind of information. But the anime usually gives a lot of imagery, like showing us this elder here, for example. And here's another instance where the anime likes to add more imagery. When Gojo is explaining the hazards of becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer, the anime goes a step beyond of what they were willing to show compared to the manga. So, when Itadori is discussing with Gojo about seeking the fingers of Sukuna, the anime actually continues the conversation inside the crematorium while Itadori is collecting his grandpa's remains. I think that this was a great decision in the long run to connect Itadori's decision even closer to his grandpa and really fleshes out this decision he's made. The manga does a callback when Itadori is thinking about how he wants to die by reminding the reader that his grandpa said to make sure he's surrounded by others when he dies. There's also a logistical change where since Gojo wasn't sitting down when they were having the second half of this conversation in the anime, he doesn't need to say upsy daisy like in the manga. So in the manga, when Itadori sees Fushiguro and says that he looks good, Fushiguro tells him that Itadori will enroll in the same school for Jujutsu, to which Itadori says, so you're not doing okay? But in the anime, he just says, huh, which I wonder why they changed it because I feel like they could have easily fit that line in. Rather than give fun facts about a character, Gege Akutami spends the time before the next chapter talking about Kikufuku Mochi, which is the treat that Gojo gets earlier in the show. They really like it and apparently got some free product after advertising it in their manga, which I think is super cool for Akutami-sensei. And then this is the image for chapter 3 of the manga, which is Itadori at his grandfather's grave before he sets out for Jujutsu High. It actually has an equivalent in the anime and is a little extra scene where he tells his grandpa that he's heading out, which I think is a really sweet moment in general. Well, just in case you were wondering what grave wax is, they're kind enough to give a small explanation of it in the manga. In case you were wondering if this green cursed doll that beats up Itadori has a name, it's Kathy, by the way. Kathy does a little dance in both the anime and the manga, but the anime adds a little mooning at the end of her dance. The anime also leaves out this little extra line about where death is usually right around the corner for most Jujutsu sorcerers. This is a really fun change of imagery in the anime compared to the manga. When the principal talks about the feeling when you're about to die, instead of a skull like in the manga, the anime actually draws Itadori in his grave. Speaking of imagery, when Itadori is giving his speech, they give a lot more imagery compared to the manga about the hypotheticals of what could happen if Itadori just runs away from his responsibility. So in the manga, I think Itadori is about to say nice to meet you, but he gets interrupted by Kathy punching him in the face. In the anime, he just gets punched in the face. In the manga, Itadori's face when he gets to see his room is really sweet, and you don't get to see it because you see Itadori's back in the anime. But the anime adds a little extra like Itadori screaming hello out the window and looking inside the closet. When Gojo tells Itadori that he could just relax while he and Fushiguro looks for the fingers, Itadori in the manga has a little extra line where he says not to make him think twice about helping them. When Gojo says that it'd be more lively if Itadori was Fushiguro's neighbor, in the manga he also tells him to think positive, to which Fushiguro replies that it's a pain. The anime has a little extra scene where Itadori compliments how organized Fushiguro's room is, but he slams the door on him and tells him he's unwelcome there. So obviously the anime shows a little bit more of the train station just for the sake of transition, but it's also interesting to note that Kugisaki is still on the train in the anime, and that you can see her backpack and her eating sushi. And then here we are at the end of the chapter, so we have some fun facts about Fushiguro this time. I think the only really interesting fact is that he hates red bell peppers, and I think Akutami is trying to say how boring he is by saying he likes reading non-fiction, for example. Well, that's all of the differences I could find between episode 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen and chapters 2 and 3. If you like this series or find it interesting, I'd really appreciate a comment or a like down below. Make sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell icon too for more anime content and to see when episode 3 of this series will come out as well. And have you guys been watching the new season of Jujutsu Kaisen as well? Leave a comment down below and tell me how you feel about it so far. Thank you so much guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time.